There was a man named Dev who spent his days pushing a wooden cart through the dusty streets of the city. He sold old books, worn, torn, and mostly forgotten by others. Every morning, he would organize the books neatly, arrange them by size, and wait for customers who rarely came. Most passed him by without a glance, but Dev kept going, day after day. He wasn't rich, he wasn't educated, but he believed that if he kept moving, life might eventually offer something. One evening, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the road, a man in a suit stopped by Dev's cart. He picked up a book with faded gold edges and asked, "How much for this one?" Dev glanced at it. The cover was cracked, the pages yellowed. 50 rupees, he said, without hesitation. The man paused. Are you sure? Dev nodded. The man paid, smiled slightly, and walked away. The next day, that same man appeared on the front page of a local newspaper, a rare book collector, and the book he had bought, a first edition, worth more than 5 lakh rupees. Dev stared at the headline in disbelief. His hands, rough from years of pushing that cart, shook as he held the paper. Dev folded the newspaper and placed it gently inside one of his crates. He didn't speak much that day. The usual rhythm of arranging books, calling out prices, and watching the world pass by felt distant, almost hollow. People came by asking about the article, some even teasing him. How does it feel to give away a fortune? One man chuckled. Dev smiled politely, but said nothing. Inside, he was caught between regret and wonder. Had he really missed a chance that big? Or was it something else? That night, under the dim light of a street lamp, Dev took out a small notebook he always carried. He began writing, not prices or sales, but thoughts. What if a mistake is not the end, but a beginning? He scribbled. What if the wrong price taught me the value of attention? The next morning, he returned to his cart, but this time, something had shifted. Instead of selling whatever people wanted, he began to study the books more closely. Their history, their rarity, their silent stories. He started talking to collectors, reading articles, asking questions. His cart didn't just hold books anymore. It held possibilities. People began noticing. Not just a man selling books, but someone who knew their soul. One afternoon, a young man stopped by Dev's cart. He looked curious but cautious. Is it true? He asked. About the book you sold? Dev nodded. It was a mistake, he said, but it opened my eyes. The young man looked down at the neatly arranged books. I want to learn, he said. Can you teach me how to see what others don't? Dev smiled for the first time in days. Start by slowing down, he replied. Every book has something hidden. You just have to ask it to speak. Word spread. People started coming not just to buy, but to learn. Dev began hosting small gatherings by the roadside, telling stories behind certain titles, explaining how knowledge hides in the overlooked. What once felt like failure had become a spark. The same hands that once gave away a treasure were now shaping futures. Months passed. A local journalist returned, not to mock, but to interview him again. How did you go from being the man who lost a fortune to someone everyone wants to learn from? Dev thought for a second, then said, because I finally realized I wasn't selling books. I was selling understanding. I just needed to understand that first myself. Dev no longer feared mistakes. In fact, he began to embrace them. Every error, he told his small crowd one day, has the potential to turn into a new direction. If you're willing to look deeper. He started collecting more than just books. He collected people's stories. Customers would come, not just for old pages, but to share their own missed chances. And Dev listened, always with quiet patience, offering not advice, but reflection. His cart became a symbol of learning, of second chances, of value not always seen at first glance. One rainy evening, a man in a dark coat stopped by. He didn't look like a customer. He asked no questions about titles or prices. Instead, he said, "I heard your story. I run a publishing house. We're creating a series on people who turned loss into wisdom. Would you consider writing your journey?" Dev hesitated. "I've never written anything formal," he said. The man smiled. "That's exactly why it will matter. Truth doesn't need polish. It just needs to be told." That night, Dev sat by candlelight with a pen in his hand, not to sell, not to explain, but to finally write the story behind the mistake that had once haunted him, and now had transformed him. Weeks turned into months, and Dev's story began appearing in local blogs, magazines, even radio segments. Not as a tragic figure who lost something, but as someone who found something deeper. He never called himself an expert. He just called himself the man who learned to pay attention. People from far-off towns came to meet him, not for books, but for clarity. Entrepreneurs, students, retired teachers, they all came with questions about timing, regret, and the fear of choosing wrong. Dev had no perfect answers, but he had perspective. "Not every missed chance is a mistake," he'd say. "Some are reminders to sharpen your eyes." One day, a young girl placed a crumpled book in front of him. "Is this valuable?" she asked. Dev looked at it for a long moment. Then he said, "It will be, because you cared enough to ask." That single sentence began circulating online, quoted, shared, turned into posters. Dev never intended to become known. He only intended to never stop learning. And somehow, that made him someone people listened to. He never forgot the day he sold the rare book. But now, he looked at it differently. Not as the day he lost 5 lakh rupees, but as the day he gained something he couldn't have bought. Purpose. Mistakes don't always take things from us. Sometimes they give us what we truly need. A new direction, a deeper understanding, a story worth telling. Dev's life didn't change because of a lost book. It changed because he allowed that loss to open a new door. He didn't hold on to regret. He chose to hold on to growth. The world often tells us that value comes from never messing up, from always making the right move. But sometimes it's the wrong turn that leads you to the right path. What matters is not avoiding mistakes, but using them to build wisdom. Dev never became rich in the traditional sense, but every day people came to him with open hearts, seeking meaning, and that made him wealthy in the way that matters most. Have you ever made a mistake that ended up teaching you more than success ever could? How did it shape who you are today? Share your story in the comments. It might just help someone turn their own regret into purpose. If this story gave you something to think about, send it to someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more stories that remind you, even a wrong step can lead to the right place.